Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Labor Day edition of the Collective Weekly Energy Share Extended World. This is Angela Coulter, and
Darcy Gavagnoni.
so we're start. I did get some clarity last night after we were texting. Sometimes it's so better when you're just texting it out with somebody, or like we know that when you talk it out with somebody, you're like, wait, huh? So I'm going to tell the little story about the weirdness of what happened.
Yeah, that's definitely worth repeating.
So, we're in a new house. We've been there. We've been here for about a week and a half now, still digging out of boxes and stuff. So the night that we left, I don't know if I talked about that. There was this weird urgency. It was almost like the night that we actually took our cats over here and stuff, even though all our stuff hadn't been moved over yet. It was like this weird, like this really heavy, intense storm came in really quick. It was pouring. It was almost like the end of a horror movie. I said that. It was like really weird, and I was observing it. It didn't it didn't register to me as scary at all or anything. I just thought, wow, this reminds me of like the end of the Amityville Horror or Poltergeist or whatever. It's sort of bizarre. Sort of put that on the shelf and was like, okay. Because then by the time we got to the new house, the rain has had lightened up and everything else, but of course the cats were all stressed out and things like that. So anyway, fast forward. Yesterday morning at 4 a.m., I was sleeping. I was dreaming, and in my dream, I suddenly heard music. Now, the new house has a full house sound system, so we have different zones. We have all kinds of like stuff that I'm still trying to figure out. But anyhow, so I wake up well, in my dream, I start hearing music, and all of a sudden, but I just sort of accepted it as part of my dream, and then all of a sudden, I hear my husband say, "What the hell is that?" and I And I roll over and I realize that there's music that sounds like it's coming out of one of the speakers in our bedroom. Just one, not that the other two, which was bizarre. So get up, Scott goes to the main control panel in the kitchen to see what's going on, and nothing. It's not on. It's the power's off. It was just so weird. Came back into the bedroom, turning the knobs on the wall to try to turn down, at least turn it down. Nothing would change it. So then, we're like, oh my God, this is so weird. And the funny thing again, like a lot of people, like I told my kids this because they slept. Well, my daughter slept there, my other one wasn't here. They're like, that's like creepy, and I'm like, actually, it wasn't even creepy. I was just like observing this guy. Okay, really? Like, what's the message that I need to get at 4 o'clock in the morning when I'm trying to sleep? Right. So my husband goes downstairs. He snuck downstairs to the basement because my daughter lives down there now, and turned off the amp entirely, like in the media room, and nothing. It was still playing. So we're like, he came back up, and we're like, still, and I'm like, I know I'm half. I'm like, all right. And I just get this message during the day. This is so bizarre. And then he's like, well, we can pull the damn speaker out of the wall, and whatever. And I was like, that would be really like labor intensive for 4 o'clock in the morning. He then goes, wait a second, and he takes like a pile of like clothes that were sitting on top of a box, and he puts the pile of clothes, like the clothes, in front of the speaker, and it didn't muffle the sound. And we're like, wait a second. So I get up and I like walk over, and I'm standing there by the thing, by the speaker, and I'm like, this is so weird. And then I look down and realize the sound is actually coming out of a box that was still packed and hadn't been unpacked yet. So it was so bizarre. So then I'm like, shit, it's coming out of the box. We untape the box. We start like unwrapping like individual pieces because it's all like the bedroom doodads. And we get to my alarm clock, which was the radio was on. And so I'm like, okay, weird, right? Because it's been in there for a week and a half and nothing. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize that my alarm clock had batteries. I pull it out. I'm looking at it, and then I'm like hitting the button to shut off the alarm. Nothing changed. I hit up the button to shut off the radio. Nothing changed. The radio would not turn off on the clock. So then I flip it over. I'm like, well, I'm just gonna pull the batteries out. I went to like open the back compartment, and it stopped. So my husband and I looked at each other like, okay. And then like literally like a minute later, it started again. I'm like, oh my God. So we had to, then the back wouldn't come off. Scott had to like, he was like, try to pry it off. He's like, I don't give a shit if I break this. I'll get you another clock.
We'll throw it away.
And then, but then finally, then the back popped out. We were able to pull the batteries out, and it was silent, totally. But so then, of course, the whole time this is happening, I'm sort of laughing to myself. I'm like thinking, this is so funny. It's so bizarre. And then I'm listening to, so what's on the radio, right? Because there's the message, right? What's
Right.
the songs? What's playing? What am I supposed to be listening to? And it was some station. It was actually called K-Love, which I thought was funny. It sort of had a little bit of a Christian tint to it, but not too much. But they were playing. The funny thing that they were was that they were playing these songs, like there were two or three songs, because this went over several songs before we figured it out. It was like these songs that were about like "Don't leave me," "I need you," all this kind of stuff. And I thought, wow, like. And then I was like, well, that was weird. Maybe that's the old house, which is very bizarre, right? And then it sort of came in that there was something that came over from that. And then I was like, okay, because it was funny that it all resolved once I was that sort of hit my mind, and I was like, but I came to a resolution with all that, so I was sort of perplexed. So then, what was so funny was, so we went back to sleep, blah blah blah. What was so funny was then last night when I finally, because we had such a full day, I finally texted you about it. I just finished texting you about it, and the power in our house like literally went off for like a minute after, like, and I'm just like, oh come on now. So we were going back and forth about that, and then we were talking about your husband had been very cranky after being away and coming back, right? And the
Right.
adjustment in your energy in that you've done, right?
Right.
And so I was sitting on that going, okay, so like I don't understand because when I left, like I did so much work with my house because it's being torn down, it's ready to die. I said we can take it with us. It was like, no, you can take the best parts of me, like with you, always like love it. So then why the resistance? Like I went back to that night that we left where it was like that weird storm thing, and then that came up, and it really felt like it was coming from there. And the house will literally be taken down within a month because they're moving back on this whole road thing here. So, and it feels dead. When you're there, it feels really like it's already gone, right? So, um, the consciousness of it. And then
Right.
I was looking at that last night, and when you and I were going back and forth about different things, and what hit me was fragmentation. So we talk about soul fragments, right?
Right.
And so different spiritual practices talk about different different meanings of having soul fragments broken off, right?
Right.
So
Right.
what was interesting, so then I was like, well, so what, by the house saying go ahead and take a part of me with you, but I'm moving on, did it fragment itself, its consciousness, which was sort of perceived to be a painful thing, right? Because we
Right.
do see that it goes back to Lemuria, which keeps on coming up lately, that fall into density, right?
Right.
Into
Well, and if you think about it, just separation is fragmentation.
mm-hmm. So after we were going back and forth about that, I was thinking, isn't that interesting? Because what was our big thing you and I have talked about and explored so much is that whole when we first really increased our density and separation in Lemuria, right? Or through the whole Lemurian age or whatever, how we felt it to be so painful, right?
Right.
Felt it
Right.
to be like it was punishment, even though we volunteered, obviously, as the divine consciousness, and we decided we were
Right.
going to do it. That is a great idea, right? And I always tell people it's sort of the great idea of I can read a book about riding a bike until I get on a bike and see what it's
Right.
really like.
Right. Exactly.
So, so then I was like, okay, so this is just an example, and right. So fragmenting. So then I started looking at, well, what is fragmenting? right? What is our soul fragmentation? So we have a lot of stuff in all these different levels of fragmentation, right? So we fragment ourselves in our own consciousness. We fragment, into separation, like, and then we forget, depending on how deep the cut is of fragmentation, right? And then,
Well, we even fragment into roles within ourselves.
right, absolutely, right. So I know there's a much bigger thing to this. This is why I'm like sort of just going through through my mind. And I was like, oh, I know this is what we're supposed to talk about today.
Well, and if you think about it, if some of us have gotten to a place where we're so ready to move on and so ready to make this big leap and shift, can we fragment and do it without everybody doing it as a whole?
Right, right. And that sort of goes back to, so how do we deal with that, right? And Ashley,
Right.
very like, good morning, Ashley. Glad you joined us today. Um, right. So that's what I was talking. So I was thinking about, like, we have looked, like, I remember when I first got into spiritual stuff before Trinity came in and everything. There were so many shamanic practice and everything else. There's like all this really intense stuff about processing fragments, soul fragments, right?
Right. Right.
I just found when I came into this that it doesn't need to be intense. You can just recall those soul fragments because they've never been apart from you. It's just been what you've decided to put in as a partition, right? To fragment it.
What you believe.
Right. So the first thing that we tend to want to do is to say, okay, well, I want to call my fragments back to me, because how many practices do that, right? I want to go through the practice of doing that, right?
Right.
And I actually went through, like, we give, and we have what we believe that is, we give fragments to people, right? And that's when somebody has soul fragments, like in multiple lifetimes, or when we say things like, I'll never leave you, or I'll always be with you, right? We give a
Right.
fragment of that person,
Right.
right? Which is that one made me think of the house, right? Because in the house is like, oh yeah, I'll always be with you, da da da. And I was like, oh, well, there was
Right.
a fragment right there, right? But it's also just a belief because we're never really apart. And when we
Right.
say this, I'm always with you, it's true because you're me anyway. Like there's
It's just
no,
stating that fact.
right, right. So it was like that recognition of, okay, so obviously, and the house hid a bunch of its fragments. So when I connected in, it had hid like a bunch of its fragments into, say, the boxes and the stuff, right, that had
Right.
come along, right? So then I was
Even
like, what?
even furniture.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And so then I was like, okay, so the first step that we want to do is to say, okay, well, you can have all your fragments back, right? Obviously, take them all back so that you're in the understanding of being whole, right?
Right.
Then really where we are is getting to the place, and that's where we get into relationships. And it's like, I haven't thought about this in so long. It's like, how many people I know who've been in relationships or situations, whatever, where they feel like they're there, they are at a dead end, they keep on hitting a brick wall, they can't get out of it, they feel like they're sort of stuck there, they don't feel like they can leave. And it's usually because the other person has an agreed upon fragment of the other person's soul that they're holding, right? So it's sort of like, well, like I feel, when you say I feel whole with this person, it's actually like, well, no, I feel whole with the fragment of mine that they're holding that I've been missing, kind of thing, right?
Right. Right.
Oh, that makes so much sense. So obviously, A is to resolve that within ourselves, but really, it's time for us to go beyond that, is what I was getting, right?
Absolutely.
Say, wait a second, you can hold whatever part of me you want because you're me anyway, right? But there's no part anyhow because it's a whole consciousness.
Right.
So I don't have to go looking for the fragments. I don't have to call them to me. I don't have to, like it's that whole perception of setting it up that I, have to bring all my parts back to me before I move on, right?
Well, and I
Because,
think that as we get to that higher perspective, the connection with those pieces and parts is just automatic.
Yes.
Yeah. It's just staying in that higher perspective.
It's staying in the higher perspective, and it's also adjusting and shifting our consciousness to recognizing that, oh, that part of my consciousness that I consider a fragment or fragmented, right, is serving a purpose for somebody else in some way,
Right.
right? Which is another part of me anyhow. So I just
Mm-hmm.
shift it. It's like like the cells in our body, right? We have some cells that can change their job if the body needs a certain kind of cell that's not available, right, to do some kind of work.
Right.
So it can just change its
Right.
job. Say, okay, I was a heart cell, now I can be a liver cell or something like that, right? And I don't know
Right.
like how, but I know that we have those. So it's sort of like saying, okay, well, I'm still full and whole, right? I resolve all that. There's something about us needing to resolve all of it into wholeness, all of the fragments into wholeness without needing to do anything. It goes back to the being, right, versus the doing,
It's that
right?
alignment.
Yeah, yeah. So for us to really, so I did actually, I connected with the house last night, and I was like, well, no matter, like, you're me anyway, you're just a reflection of me as I'm a reflection of you. And whether you move on to someplace else or whatever, it doesn't matter because it's only A, illusion, but B, you're always whole.
Right.
Because I'm always whole. And so when I did that, and then I mean, literally it took 5 minutes, and I connected in, and I could just see all of a sudden it was like this realignment of like all these little pieces, like of hidden like shards kind of thing, all through
Right.
all my, right. And then it just, they all lit up, they got all sparkly, and they all sort of went poof and dispersed. And it was so powerful. And I'm just like, well, hell, I need to do that for me.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That does feel really powerful from the perspective of it's so supportive in that notion that you already have everything you need.
Right. And it takes away the energy of something else actually completes you, right? Like being
Right.
with this person makes you feel whole. Being in this
Right.
position or in this role makes you feel whole. You know, being in this place makes you feel whole, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because, and like, oh, well, that's exactly what we feel like, because a part of us is where we're attracted to or feel like we have a lack of, right? So that's what we want to, make us whole in different ways. It's just a different way of seeing it. And then I was like, oh, well, and once we acknowledge that it's not a whole, but actually that we are whole, right? Play on that word.
Right.
Somewhere along the way, we lost the W.
Right. Yeah.
That it's like, okay, well, of course, because then it's just a higher recognition of all of this is a part of me. Like I look at the trees, well, that's me too. Like that's, you know, if you think about how we even have the interconnection that's represented in nature here,
Right.
it's showing us that we're all a part of each other and everything else, and that it's all part of us, and it's
All the way
integrated.
all the way out to the universe looking like the molecule and out is in and in is
Yeah.
out. Yep. And you think about all that, and it to me, I just feel like it collapses it all down into just right this minute, and that's all there is.
Right. And there's nothing outside of this wholeness, right? Right. So which makes it feel like almost like you're erasing all these lines, right? That just
Right.
makes it come together.
Right. Right. Well, and it simplifies it at the same time. It complicates it because it's so simple.
Right. Well, because we're not used to thinking that way, right?
Right.
Thinking it, because thinking comes through separation, and when we're existing in wholeness, the thinking is like, yeah, like my mind was trying to catch up to that whole understanding because it was going so fast last night, right?
Right.
And then the mind's like, but what, wait.
Yeah.
You know,
But
but yeah. And and so we did not have any music wake us up at 4 o'clock this morning. I did have a dream though that actually sort of punctuated it, and I know that's what came to me. It was a dream about um having. It was interesting. I had to. Oh yeah, I almost forgot about the dream. Yeah, so I had a dream about there was like I don't want to say it was a factory. It was more like we were in a creation space. Let's just call it that, right? It was
right.
like sort of like a factory because we things would just change form, right? And the first things that would um, decide to change form were the animals, were our pets and the animals, right? Which is interesting because you've gone through all the pet
Right.
adjustments.
Right.
I did that a couple of years ago, and so in the dream, I was watching all this happen with like, and I can't even describe the enormity of it because it was like on a whole basis. Well, then I saw my cat, Obi, like he was hanging out watching with me, and I had to go and do something else, and I came in and he was gone. And I said to my kids, well, where did he go? And they said, oh, well, he went and got reassimilated. And I had like this massive, what? Like without telling me, without
Right.
whatever. And I was really upset. And then it was like, and I could hear him saying, but I'm still here.
Right.
Like, but you're not here. And then it was like, when I woke up, I was like, okay, so that's part of my mind trying to like understand, this shifting and perspective of remembering.
Hmm.
Because it was like this loss, right? Because I felt like, oh, but I lost my cat and da da da. And he's like,
Right.
no, I'm just here differently. And the more we push that on ourselves and into our consciousness, into that recognition, the less we then feel like something is, well, then we just have no concept of what lack could be because we never feel like anything is separate from us anymore.
Right.
The hip tingling.
I know. Something I feel like it's just draining out of my cells.
So let's just go do that, shall we?
Yeah. I don't think we need any more discussion about it. It just, yeah.
Yeah, it does. It feels like a big shot back.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's go do.
Okay.
Ooh, I'm like, ooh. That was just like a big collective breath of relief, sigh of relief.
Yeah. Laurel says that she keeps getting dropped off, and I noticed my connection said error loading. I don't know if Facebook's like, yeah, I don't know if we can do this or not.
Yeah, but once we hit the core, the essence of what that felt like, it felt so good. Like I kept on seeing little like flaps, like little hidden. Like this is sort of another level of that, all those different compartments, right? The hidden crumbs and everything else. Because it's like, well, then it doesn't matter.
Right. It was funny because I saw myself in this big, like, you know, cage matrix, whatever you want to call it. And I had this little eraser and I was going on erasing all these lines. And I was like, oh, this feels so good. And then I looked around me and went, never get this done. You know, one little line at a time. And I was just like, it's like when I come in to paint a room and I'm like doing the trim and it's like, I'd love to be able to just touch one spot and it just spreads. And so I was like, okay, let's just do that here. And so it was like everywhere I would touch the eraser, it just started spreading. And I noticed how when it came to certain people that it would be like, it would like go around them and I would be like, what's that? And it's like, there's still judgment associated with that
Right.
person. And I was like, oh, that makes total sense. And it was like, okay, so I judge it as in I don't want it to be part of me.
Right. Well, or it's
So,
created as a fragment so that
right,
you can see it as not part of you, right?
right, right. Yeah. So it was like so informative. But
Yeah, I
it,
had something like that too. Because I kept on seeing things like that, but in a different light. And I was just like, okay, but to do this, you need to flow through all of it. It's like, then,
right,
yeah.
right. And what I thought was interesting is for some reason this popped in um, yesterday when I was at Whole Foods. We saw this family get out of this convertible Bentley, and I was just like, wow, you know, such 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 an extreme representation right there. And I was like, but if that's all everybody, it was like every I saw the exchange of money. It's like, okay, I make my house payment myself.
Right.
So it just really shifted that whole dynamic in my understanding of how I'm really just paying myself.
Yeah.
And we all can have convertible Bentleys
Yes, we can. Absolutely.
if that's what we want.
Right. Right. Well, as long as there's no line that fragments, right? That's the whole thing is like, okay,
Right,
then let's exist without it needing to exist that way.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's not really a lot of like, it's like this is beyond the scope of words that we're used to describing it. So it's like I
Oh
could
yeah.
see responses that were just so much because I saw something about money in there too, and it was just like funny you would think about that. I was like, so you just walk into a bank and be like, okay, well, I'm just going to take this to go to the store because it's mine anyway. Like, like the energy of that, right? We laugh at that,
Right.
but I mean, the energy of that because it's like, well, it's me and me and me, right?
Right. There is nothing else.
Then that's when, yeah, things really started to smooth out. That felt really good. So this one should feel really nice this week.
Yeah, that was really, I felt a lot of pressure build up in my head. I was like, there's no need.
Right.
Like, trying to wrap your mind around it kind of thing.
Yeah, literally.
Ooh.
Because when we do that, then that's where we really can feel everything. So it's really funny. There's so much out there about this would make sense of why the book that I chose to read right now had a lot of this in it. While I'm doing my painting, I put on the audiobook.
Right.
So it's why, like, when we talk about things like, like right now, there's such this big, huge glitz on empath, right? Like, oh, I'm an empath, and oh, and da, da. It's like, so, like, whenever somebody says that to me, I say, well, we're all empaths. It's what we choose to allow ourselves
Right.
to feel, right? So there's this book that I'm listening to, and they it's very element based. Excuse me. And so this woman is a water crafter, and from the water she can feel because everybody's so much made of water, she can feel everybody's thoughts and emotions, like really, like she has to guard herself against it and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to think about that because we put a lot of time, and when I even first had my Grand Awakening, I even put a lot of time into focusing my energy to hold that space so that I didn't have to worry about taking on other people's stuff, right?
Right. Right.
But we truly are living in that space of wholeness. We can observe everything with love as part of the wholeness and realize that it's all just like this is where I lose words because it's like you just see it and feel it differently. Like because then you embrace feeling everything
Right.
because then it actually makes you more astute at shifting things because you know exactly where to hone in any given moment, right? But it's not allowing it to take over you. Oh, there you are. Yeah, you froze up for a minute. But it's
Uh,
not,
it's
yeah, but
almost
it's,
like it's a full body experience without attachment.
yeah, yeah. And it's,
It's the epitome of observation.
and connection,
Right.
right?
Right.
In a completely different way. So it's like, okay, well, you know, the way we perceived it and taking on other people's stuff is that we allow it to take over and sacrifice to our own stuff instead of realizing it is all of our stuff. So there's nothing to take over, right?
Right.
When we change
Right.
that energy, it just changes completely, and then you can just observe. Ooh, I can feel that in my body. So, but then, yeah, then you lose your need to have emotion about it, right?
Right.
Or
Right.
ego, especially. That feels good. So like this,
Yeah, that
that's
feels really good.
to take a lot of shifting this week.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely.
But it's, yeah, that feels really good. It feels like what comes to mind. You know the thing where I guess it's is it Pepsi and you throw in that like Tums thing or whatever it is that makes it put fizz up or I can't
Right.
recall. Yeah, it's almost like
Yeah.
we just up the tablet in the bottle and it's just going Like everything's
Right.
just letting go.
Puking up.
Yeah, that feels really good. Uh, yeah, and it just when we do that, there's no need for fear because there's nothing outside of us, right? And this is like we've been talking about this wholeness thing, but it's all these ways I think that we lock ourselves into staying in those separate like compartments, you know?
Right, right.
Breathe. Oh, all right. Well, happy Labor Day.
I know, I know. Yep,
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Sit in that for a while, like, and be aware. I mean, gosh, this is a huge. This is really shifting a complete, like a huge complete shift in the way we experience without even
everything.
words,
Right.
everything. Yeah. Have a great week. We'll see what comes up next week.
That's right. What follows this?
All right. This is Angela Coulter and
There's C. Gavagnoni.
bringing you this week's Tender World. Have a good one.